Hello, SpongicX here, and I'm a little worn out. So much went wrong with trying to make this review, but anyways, I just after spending like 28 hours on it, I finally beat Sonic Frontiers, and overall, I was pretty happy with this game despite its many flaws. And I wanted to get to this review sooner, but I had to get my PC upgraded lately. I bought a new graphics card for it, but there was a lot that my computer wasn't compatible for it with, so I had to get a new case and a motherboard just so it could work. The video quality for the clips provided might be very inconsistent. Like, the first chunk of gameplay was recorded off my capture device, while the rest was recorded bit by bit off the Xbox Series S, and for some reason, when playing on the Series S, it causes the audio to be very delayed. I noticed that not only with my uploads or recordings, but even with others on Twitter. Like when people share it off of the Xbox, the audio is terribly delayed. But for some reason, like when people upload like a footage of what it's like to play on the Switch, the audio syncs just fine, but the visual quality is worse. And then to make matters worse, when I got my computer back. So I recorded for this, but unfortunately, because I got a new motherboard, it kind of changed with the settings of some of my default things. So for some reason, my microphone wasn't hooked up right, basically. It didn't have the right settings. And so when I recorded and pressed playback, I had nothing but a blank audio file. And it's like, oh, shoot. And so I did some checking this time to make sure the microphone was working. But this was a lengthy review, so now I gotta do it all over again. So hopefully this will go more smoothly, though, because I do feel like I made a lot of mess-ups on the first one. But, okay, that out of the way. So, there's no denying that Sega has really neglected the fans of the Dreamcast and GameCube era of Sonic. The classic Genesis fans have been given some good comebacks with the likes of Sonic Generations, Sonic Mania, and Sonic Origins. Ever since the failure that was Sonic 06, Sega seems to have lost faith in the 3D adventure formula, and tried shoehorning in side-scrolling into every Sonic game ever since Sonic Unleashed. And I know some like that, but I never liked that. I just want pure 3D again, and Sega has been too focused on purely 2D or 2D 3D hybrids, but when are we finally going to get a pure 3D Sonic game again? Unfortunately, despite what the trailers and coverage might have led people onto, Sonic Frontiers is not a pure 3D platformer. It arguably is mostly a 3D platformer this time, but it still shoehorns in those pesky side-scrolling sections that overstay their welcome. It really messes up the flow of the gameplay at times and makes some worlds very annoying to get through, especially World 3. While I enjoyed the game overall, there's no denying that it is a very mixed bag. There are moments that work and moments that don't. This review will go into many of the game's aspects and break down the good and the bad. So starting off with the gameplay. For the first time ever, we get to play as Sonic in a more open world-like environment, very similar to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I honestly had more fun with this compared to Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild was fun at first, but got very tiring due to the limitations in movement and the inventory system with everything breaking on you, and so to play what feels like Breath of the Wild, but with a faster and more athletic character like Sonic, it was much more fun to play, honestly. Basically Breath of the Wild, but in fast platformer mode. However, the game starts off very rough. This plays more like an RPG platformer hybrid instead of a traditional Sonic game, so Sonic's stats can be upgraded, and he can gain new abilities throughout the game. I wouldn't really say throughout the game. There aren't a whole lot of abilities, to be honest, but defeating enemies allows Sonic to gain skill points, which can be exchanged to upgrade a skill tree for new abilities. Sonic can also collect certain fruits and lost creatures called Cocos, and exchange them to certain Elder Cocos for stat increases, and so Sonic has 4 separate stats, each with a max level of 99. The upgrades are neat, but by the point Sonic finally gets max leveled on all of his stats, he will somehow still feel slower and weaker compared to previous outings he's been in. So it kind of makes you just wish he started off stronger and got even stronger in the end, instead of starting off weak and still feeling weak in the end. But the 4 stats include, out of the 4 stats, the first is attack power, which affects how strong Sonic's hits are. Defense allows Sonic to lose less rings or health when getting attacked. Speed increases Sonic's movement and boost power, while rings increase Sonic's max ring/health count. The skill tree was a fun idea, but like I said, there weren't a whole lot in this game. There weren't any upgrades for said skills either. I was able to basically get all the skills towards the beginning of the second world. I was hoping like this would be something that would last throughout the entire game. It's like, oh, I've already got them all. That's a bummer. Skills are just basically combat abilities. Just nothing, you know, it would have been nice to get some abilities that helped you maneuver through the world a lot better. Like some abilities that are needed to get through certain obstacles. But no, it's just combat. And it's like, while most of them might look stylish or flashy, they honestly aren't that useful for the most part. It's like there are some good ones, like the projectile one, which is good for attacking enemies from a distance, but most of them are just basically duplicates of what you already have, just flashy spins or kicks and counter attacks, basically, or I don't know. But so the game gets much better as Sonic's stats increase, but it is way too easy to max out Sonic's stats by the time you make it to chapter 4 or 5, basically, and so, or 3 or 5, I should say. But in each world, there's a hidden portal that takes you to Big's fishing spot. So, never thought I'd say there's actually a game where I enjoyed Big the Cat's presence. But, so, you collect these purple coins throughout the game, and if you exchange them to Big the Cat, he'll let you basically cast a fishing rod, and you play a simple yet fun and relaxing fishing minigame where you just have to time it right to the gauges and reel in whatever you get, and it's real fun. Like, one minute you're collecting just, like, very realistic, simple fish, and all of a sudden you catch something unexpected, like an alligator or, so, a hammerhead shark, or, it's really fun. I really did enjoy that mode. I really needed that after a long, tiring day of work. So, upon each capture, you'll receive tokens based on the catch's value, and you can exchange these tokens for a hefty number of items needed to progress throughout the game. It's a neat idea, but I really do wish this had more personal rewards instead of just stuff to help you progress through the games faster. It really made the fishing mode feel kind of broken in the end. Like, honestly, the fishing mode is the quickest, safest, and easiest way to get through the game. Otherwise, you'll have to keep adventuring through the hub worlds and keep finding these items physically, which is more time-consuming. Or you can just rush it and buy all this stuff in the fishing mode. It's kind of broken, to be honest, but so the gameplay is similar to the gameplay of Sonic Unleashed, but in a more open-world setting, and with a bit of a collectathon gimmick. It unfortunately also has the same sluggish speed and awkward physics of games like Lost World and Forces. I always kind of wanted to see how a Sonic game would have played like with a progression system like Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie. Unfortunately, the execution could have been a lot better. There are way too many collectibles, and many of them are not only easy to get, but aside from the 7 Chaos Emeralds, all the items are broken mostly, and can just be reset and collected many times over in the same spots. Because this game has a system very similar to Breath of the Wild's Blood Moon, but I'll get more on that later. So the game has many of the elements we've seen in many past Sonic games. You still got the rings, the springs, the grind rails, and dash pads. And we also see the poles that were introduced in Sonic Adventure 2, where Sonic could swing around them, and when you timed it right, he could fling off them to get a higher ground. I feel like Sonic 06 was the only game to actually perfect that system. I feel like maybe Sonic Generations, I can't remember if that had it, but felt like the physics on those games were better compared to how it was in Sonic Adventure 2, but Sonic Frontiers got it all wrong. The gauge is just very misleading, and it's terrible and unresponsive, and it's mostly just a golden wheel with a green mark somewhere on it, and you'd think jumping off when it lands on the green mark will give Sonic the perfect jump. Instead, it causes him to let go and drop. So best advice I have is to time it right before it touches green, but either way, the gauge and timing feels very off. And going back to this game being a collectathon, all I can say is, okay, people said Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Tooie overdid it with the collectibles, but I've seen not a single person criticize the progression on collectibles in this game for Sonic Frontiers. And I mean, yeah, Sonic, when it comes to Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Tooie, they had an overwhelming abundance of collectibles, especially for the time that those games were released, but at least they actually did something. They were needed to progress, and most of the items on this are useless leftovers. It's just like, it's crazy how much of this stuff is scattered throughout the map, and it does absolutely nothing. It's not like Sunset Overdrive or Insomniac Spider-Man, where collecting all this stuff, it does actually reward you in the end. It's like most of this stuff, it's like you just need a small percentage of this stuff to get through the game's story. But like I said, a lot of these items regenerate over time, so it just feels like you have all these never-ending respawns of items that do absolutely nothing. It's so pointless. It's not rewarding like Ratchet and Clank either, where, yeah, a lot of the items there are respawnable, but there's just like such an overwhelming amount needed to get unlockable. In Sonic Frontiers, it's very quick and easy to get this stuff over time, so it doesn't add much replay value, unfortunately. The main goal of Sonic Frontiers worlds is to collect the 7 Chaos Emeralds. There's technically 5 worlds altogether, but the 4th world really is more of for story purposes. It doesn't play like the other worlds, so that one doesn't really have collectibles. It just has some objectives, and I'll get to that later. But so you have to get 7 Chaos Emeralds, which are needed to defeat this game's big bosses, which are called the Titans. So after each boss, Sonic moves in the next world, loses the emeralds, and has to find them all over again. So if you thought collecting 7 emeralds in past games was a lengthy process, well, now we have to collect them 4 times total in this game, making it feel more like we're collecting 28 emeralds instead of the usual 7. But a lot is needed to get the emeralds. So on the bright side, we don't have to worry about looking for bonus stages and praying to God we get those done right. Otherwise, we'll have to start the whole level over and get to the Chaos Emerald bonus stages all over again. It's nothing like that, luckily. Less brutal than that. But so 3 of the emeralds will be located at distant altars, while 3 others will be rewarded for helping Sonic's friends and these creatures called the Cocos by playing dumb missions and mini-games. The 7th Chaos Emerald is always guarded by the world's boss, so getting the emeralds aren't as easy as just finding them, though. You gotta do a lot of collecting of other things. Just get these other collectibles. First, you've got to discover the lands of this world, which is a pretty tiring process. But eventually, you get the ability to open the map and place guidance markers, help guide Sonic in the right direction. You need to look out for the question mark symbols and solve a puzzle to mark the territory. Most of them are very simple to solve, but the ones that involve hitting balls through hoops are honestly my least favorite in the game. But I know there are going to be a lot of these that people are absolutely going to hate. Like, I know some people didn't like the light up floor panel challenges. I didn't think they were that bad. Some of them did take multiple attempts, but nothing like frustrating. I didn't think they were as bad as people made them out to be, but either way, I still wish it was just as simple as finding these landmarks and activating them with a press of a button, similar to like climbing the towers and activating the beacons in Breath of the Wild. But so you are rewarded once you find all of those territories. Like, it's not necessary to find them all, but it is rewarding because it does allow you to quick travel between the cyberspace levels, which I'll get more onto those later. But so to get to the Chaos Emeralds from the altars, you need a certain number of Chaos Emerald keys in order to unlock the Chaos Emeralds. So these keys can be hidden in the overworld, and they're held by enemies and guardian bosses, and some can even be redeemed at Big's fishing spot in exchange for the tokens. So one of the quickest ways to get the keys is to complete the cyberspace levels. There's a number of portals throughout the worlds, which lead to short levels that play more like the acts from the traditional Sonic games, or even the Sonic Unleashed formula games. But, however, you need a certain number of items to open these portals. So, yeah, to get Chaos Emeralds, you need keys. In order to get keys, you have to have another item in order to open the portals. It's a big mess on, you need this collectible to get this collectible, and yeah, it's pretty tiring at times. You have to find these gears, and they're hidden in the same vein as the Emerald Keys. So it takes like 1 to 3 gears to open portals, and each cyberspace level has 4 missions, which involves reaching the end goal, collecting a specified number of rings, beating a time limit, and finding 5 red star rings. So ever since Sonic Colors, I hated the introduction of the star rings, but I actually had a little more enjoyment in finding them this time, and it's nice to know that you don't have to find every red star ring in this game in order to get some kind of hard to get unlockable. Like in Sonic Colors, getting them all allowed you to activate these bonus stages where beating all of them gave you Chaos Emeralds, which rewarded you with Super Sonic. And I really wish this game did give you a way to play as Super Sonic post-game, but no, it doesn't. You only get to play as him during the boss fights, the big boss fights, and there isn't a replay mode for that, unfortunately. So yeah, this game already has us collecting a whole bunch of stuff, but wait, there's more. So to get the other set of emeralds in these levels, the ones that aren't in the altars, they require you to progress through the story of those levels, which to progress through the stories, you have to help Sonic's friends. So each world has an area where Sonic's friends are trapped. Sonic has to free them, and then in order to free them, though, he needs a certain number of items that are linked to those characters. So, like for Amy, you had to find hearts. For Knuckles, you had to find medals for some reason. And so you have to find a certain number of things to free these characters, and then you'll have to keep running into the characters as they keep moving from one end of the level to another. And you can't just talk to them, though. For no well-explained reason, you have to have more of those collectible items to talk to them. But on the bright side, these are the easiest items to get, and there's just way too many of them, and it's really annoying. But so eventually it'll trigger some kind of event, and which leads to mini-games, puzzles that are necessary to progress, and most of them involve helping the new characters called Cocos, and the Cocos really add nothing to this game. It feels like Sega's just trying to piss off the people who keep wanting the Chow Garden back. It's like Sega saying, "Oh, you missed the Chow? Well, screw you. Here's some annoying rocks with faces on them." I don't know. It's just real annoying. And there are many times where you're wondering, why should we be helping these little bastards anyways? All you're trying to do is help them, and all of a sudden they're just bombing you in a mission where you're trying to herd them to safety. It's like, why? What is going on here? These Cocos are bastards. And so as I said, the character-specific items are the easiest items to get, to the point where there will just be way too many of them left over on the map after you get just the little you need to progress. So don't bother collecting them all. It's like, I know some people are obsessed with being completionists in games. You want to find everything in the game, and usually games do reward you for that. This one does not. I know, I've already got all the achievements in the game, and I still have too many of these things I haven't even bothered collecting, because when I first played this, I did bother trying to collect them all, but then I saw you get nothing for it. It's like, so what's the point? And so on the bright side, it's nice that the game tried making it more optional and accessible for how players can progress in their own way. I mean, there's many ways to go through this game. You can either play through the game traditionally, like I'm just adventuring through the areas and coming across new areas, new enemies, defeating them, and getting the items, or you can just rely on just revisiting the safe areas you've already been to and beaten, and just doing that over and over until you finally get them. That would probably be the most time-consuming process, though, but then, of course, the quickest and safest way is to just fish for them. So, it's a nice idea, but it doesn't do anything to reward the players who put all that time and effort into trying to do things traditionally. So, like for me, I mostly relied on doing it the fishing way, because I just knew how unrewarding it was to... It's like I already felt like I saw everything these levels had to offer, all the enemies that the game had to offer. So instead of doing that over and over, I'd rather just do something simple and kind of fun for a while, like the fishing minigame. But, so yeah, I don't know. I just wish this game was more rewarding for those who bothered trying to put time and effort into having a more action-packed adventure. So, on the bright side, you don't have to scratch your head in confusion and waste hours looking through an online guide on where and how to find everything in order to get some hard-to-reach reward, because, like I said, there is no post-game reward for getting everything, so you don't need to bother trying to find everything. Just enough to get through the story, that's it. So, I mean, I would say also you try to look for stuff to help upgrade Sonic, but like I said, even that can wear out really quickly. So yeah, this game does not have the best replay value, unfortunately, despite being a big open world game. But so after finally getting 6 Chaos Emeralds and triggering all the story events, a gateway will open up, which leads to a puzzle, which is the gateway to the final boss fight of that world. And so the first world's puzzle was the most annoying. Basically a big Zelda-esque puzzle. Involves rotating these giant lasers until they match markings on the ground, and It would have been fine if moving just one laser only affects one laser, but moving certain lasers will cause multiple to move at once, so it makes it really hard to line them up properly. It's like you think you have it right, but then you moved one that moved like 3 lasers at once, and it messed up everything. And I honestly wish I just saved time and looked up online on how to complete this, because it took me about over 30 minutes to get it right. And luckily, the other puzzles aren't as bad, but some of them might be annoying. The second world was the easiest one. It was just where you had to use a crane to lift colored balls and move them into their respective colored spots. The third world is the one I actually hear most people online complaining about, and that is a pinball minigame. And so, for those who like the pinball minigames or levels, or even the pinball games of Sonic in the past, well, I hate to break it to you, but this is no Casinopolis from Sonic Adventure. This pinball game is really bad, and it just has terrible physics. It gives you a 2-life limit and a ridiculous high score requirement needed to get through. It does have like a high score multiplier where the more rings you collect, the higher your score gets, which is necessary in order to beat the score requirement. But I mean, it's bad enough that it takes dumb luck to win this one. No skill, just dumb luck. It's bad enough at that, but what makes it so bad, though, is that it's just boring. It is not a well-designed pinball table. The ones from Sonic Adventure were so much better. I'll even dare say that weird forest pinball thing from Sonic Forces was more entertaining than this. The one in Frontiers is not only small, but it's very unappealing to look at. It just uses these dark, grimy colors, and you don't have like these cool character artworks like of Sonic or Knight's characters like you did in Sonic Adventure, and it's boring. It's just very uncreative. It feels like from one of those like bad minigame collections that you get for like a budget price, or some kind of bootleg game. That's how bad it is. So as bad as the minigames were, I'm surprised there wasn't even a replay mode in this game. There's no way to replay any of these minigames. Even Sonic Adventure had that as a feature. So you can't even refight any of the Titan boss fights, and it would have been nice to be able to replay the Titans after buffing up Sonic's stats and see how much faster you can take them down now that you're powerful enough. But the biggest disappointment is the lack of a cutscene mode, and considering how the cutscenes are in real time and are affected by the game's pesky day and night cycles, the nighttime settings always ruin the cutscenes and makes them just too dark and bland to look at. And it would have been nice to rewatch these cutscenes and have a slider option to allow you to change throughout the settings of day through night and balance it out. Like if you wanted to like make it look like a sunset or something, that would have been a cool feature. But no, we don't get that, unfortunately. So, and like I said, I wasn't able to record this game like I wanted to. I was only able to record most of it in 59-second clips on Xbox Series S, and so it would have been nice to have a cutscene mode where I could have hooked up my capture device and record them properly in high definition, but can't do that. So if I ever really want to rewatch these cutscenes again, I'm better off just looking up, see if someone on YouTube upload a compilation of them all. So the only Titan and cutscenes that are replayable is the final one, and the game doesn't save progress after beating the game, meaning it will warp you back to the last checkpoint before the final battle. So you can always just go back and replay that. And so one of the biggest problems this game has is that it just drags on way too much. At least Mario Odyssey made the story linear and easy to follow, while leaving the levels big enough and rewarding enough for replay. Once you go back, you see that the game's even much bigger than you realize, and there's still plenty to do afterwards. And Sonic Frontiers is overstuffed with content that tries hiding how empty the game really is. It just makes the replay value even more lacking in the end. It really saddened me, because overall I did enjoy this game, and I was looking forward to going back and seeing what else there was to do, only to realize I already did everything. There was barely anything for me to do, and no Super Sonic, no additional characters to unlock, no new levels, no alternate outfits and skins, just nothing. The controls and physics in this game are very bad, about as sluggish and wonky as the controls in Sonic Lost World and Sonic Forces. I'd say the game is still better than those two games, but Sonic moves just way too slow, and he's just stiff, and even after all of his stats get maxed out, it just doesn't feel right regardless. And there are pause menu options to adjust the sensitivity of Sonic's controls, but it still doesn't help. I really missed the looser controls and physics of the adventure games and wish they tried improving upon it instead of ignoring it and just recycling the horrible coding from Lost World all over again. The adventure games had a great sense of momentum, where pushing harder and longer on the control sticks really moves the characters faster, and it's just been absent ever since Sonic 06, and Sonic still has the same sluggish jump and double jump he had in games like Lost World, and this does mark the first 3D game to utilize the drop dash, a neat addition, but I wish we had a regular spin dash as well. The boost system is still here, but it's slower and weaker. The boost can no longer be used to bowl over enemies. Sonic's homing attack took some getting used to in this game, but it was honestly a change for the better. Unlike most Sonic games, double jumping does not trigger the homing attack, but the X button does, similar to in Sonic Unleashed, but it was very distracting in Sonic Unleashed because there were many times where, it shared the exact same button as the boost button. So there are times where you tried triggering the homing attack, instead it just boosted Sonic through the air into his death, and that really sucked. So, I did think that actually, and then there were some other games where having the double jump, sharing the same button as the homing attack, was not a good idea either. There are times where you tried jumping at or over a certain enemy by double jumping, but somehow it accidentally triggered the homing attack instead, and it really messed up what you were trying to do. And so you don't have to worry about that anymore. But personally, I do think Sega just needs to get rid of the double jump. I don't hear anyone say they like the double jump. It wasn't necessary in the old games, even the Adventure 3D game, so why do we need it now? It was added ever since Sonic Colors, and I've never heard a single Sonic fan say they liked it. And the physics always fell off with the double jump, especially with turning, and it's just too floaty and sluggish and very unresponsive to control, and I never liked it. There is a bit of parkour in this game as well. It does feel like a slight improvement over the sluggish parkour we had in Sonic Lost World, but it only works for climbable surfaces that have a slick green texture on them, and so Sonic can climb briefly, but if you hold the boost button while he's climbing, he can get on his feet and start running up the walls, and it's a neat ability, but it's still horribly executed and very unreliable at times. Sometimes Sonic will either slide off, not cling on, or he'll even clip through the climbable surfaces, which can make some of these obstacle course sections even more annoying. So like I said, the homing attack, I do like how they made it a separate button from the double jump, but it is a huge downgrade regardless. I'll even say Sonic Forces even had a better homing attack. It feels so sluggish in this game, especially compared to the adventure games. You can't trigger a rapid chain of combo attacks anymore, or homing attacks, because every time you do a homing attack in this game, it causes some massive recoil on Sonic. It just slows him down and makes him delayed, so I don't know why, but it's not satisfying to do a chain of homing attacks anymore, because it just feels so sluggish. And same thing with using the Lightspeed Dash. Back then, the Lightspeed Dash would boost Sonic. Instead, it makes him come to a complete halt once he's done doing it, and I don't get why there's so much delay on this game. Like, if you let go of the joystick while doing a dash pad, running across the dash pad, Sonic just comes to a complete halt. It feels so jarring. I don't like it at all. The Lightspeed Dash also got a strange button remapping, and unlike the homing attack, I can't say I'm a fan of this one. So I liked how, back then the homing attack, or the Lightspeed Dash, I mean, it shared the same button as basically the roll ability, and that became really pesky in games like Sonic Adventure 2 or Sonic 06, where you had to use the Lightspeed Dash in mid-air, but it shared the same button as the bounce ability, where if you do that over a cliff, it will cause Sonic to just drop to his death. So there are many times where you try doing the Lightspeed Dash, but it doesn't trigger right, because it's confused over whether you were trying to drop, whether you were trying to bounce or do the Lightspeed Dash, and then it just drops you to your death. So Sonic Unleashed actually had a great idea to change the buttons for the Lightspeed Dash. They gave us the Y button for using that now, and that was a great compromise. So it made the Lightspeed Dash more enjoyable to use in later games. But so for some reason, they made it where you have to click the left joystick. That's L3 basically. That's so weird. And so, yeah, I don't really like that. That was like I was actually pretty impressed with a lot of the button changes here. I didn't mind the boost being on the R trigger. I liked how you no longer had to use the homing attack with the same double jump button, but I drew the line at the light speed dash. That was just terrible. So Sonic can still do the sidestep like in Sonic Unleashed, but it's more unresponsive in this, especially during the cyber chase. And I'd mostly recommend just using it for dodging. But otherwise, I'd say the main use it's for is for the combat. Unlike most Sonic games, this one does have a combat system, and so pressing the X button when on the ground will cause Sonic to home in on enemies with punches and kicks, and he also, with some of the combat abilities you can upgrade, you eventually do get a projectile firing attack. Not as powerful, but it's a good way to attack enemies from a safe distance. So, and then there's also a parry ability, or a counter ability in this, and I just felt like it felt very out of place for a Sonic game, and but I think what really bugged me about it was the game didn't do a very good job at setting up how you use it, I guess. Like, it does have a slight tutorial, but I don't feel like it was descriptive enough, and the way you pull it off is very inconvenient. So, you think, like, okay, to parry, you just have to press a simple button, like a shoulder button. No, you gotta press two at the same time, and you don't only have to press them, you gotta hold them. So, for the Xbox versions, you gotta hold the L and R buttons at the same time. And I felt like the game said you had to just press them, and no, you have to hold them. But to make matters worse, I'm used to games being very punishing with counterattacks, where you have to do it at the right time. If you do it too early or too late, it won't work. And so, this is a game where, okay, so I was doing it wrong when I first did it. Not only was I not holding the L button and R button, but I wasn't doing it ahead of time. I kept trying to time it just right, and I kept messing up every time. And so, once I realized, okay, you have to hold it, and you have to do it ahead of time before the attack hits, okay, but yeah, I'm so used to games rewarding you for doing a perfect counter, and this is not one of those games. However, this doesn't mean that you can just keep holding the shoulder buttons to counter multiple attacks at once. So, like, if you have, like, a horde of enemies attacking you one after the other, you have to, like after you counter one attack, you do have to let go of the shoulder buttons, but quickly hold them again to counter the next set of attack, and then repeatedly. So, yeah, at least they didn't make it too easy where you can just keep holding it to keep guarding and blocking attacks. Yeah, at least it does have some form of reflex to make it a little more challenging. But, yeah, at first I hated the counter ability, but once I got more used to it, I actually did like it. But I still think it is a very unnecessary addition to a Sonic game. Like, I don't mind having a Sonic game where Sonic can punch and kick. I just wish there wasn't so much button mashing required. But so most of these battles can be avoided by running from the enemies, but but when the combat is triggered, you aren't allowed to open your map, save your data, or talk to characters to get through the story, which gets very annoying with how enemies are scattered throughout these worlds. And another new ability is, I can't remember the name for it, I think it was the loop cycle or something, but basically, yeah, hold the Y button and it allows you to do a light trail to have it follow Sonic, and so you run around certain objects creating a light trail, and it can trigger events and reveal hidden items, like rings and all of that. And so it's like, basically, if you're running low on health, you can just break the game, keep running around in circles with the loop cycle, and just keep farming rings. It's that simple. So, yeah, some enemies are hard to figure out at first, and might take many hits or deaths before you finally get it right, and, or find the right strategy required, and, otherwise, like, I wouldn't say the combat in this game is that great, though, but it's not terrible. Like, some people might have fun with it, but I did find it kind of tedious at times, but it's not as bad as games like Sonic Unleashed or Rise of Lyric. Like, some of those enemies were too much of powerhouse sponges, and it took way too many hits. It's like, once you max level Sonic, it's like fighting enemies isn't so annoying anymore. But the best part of the game, in my opinion, was just roaming around the overworld and trying to find all the goodies and locations, and items need to level up and all that. But like I said, it doesn't take terribly long to max out Sonic's stats, which may wear out the game's fun over time, and it gives players less motivation to want to replay upon completion. Aside from the puzzles and minigames, the cyberspace levels are the worst parts of the game, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks that. I've heard many people mention that online, and I really wanted to like these parts since they were basically just the action stages from the adventure games, but they play too much like stages from Forces with like the wonky controls, and but somehow the controls are even worse than the controls. The speed and physics are somehow even worse than the overworld gameplay of Sonic Frontiers. In cyberspace, nearly everything causes Sonic to halt, whether it's the light speed dash, the homing attacks, or letting go of the joystick after using a boost pad. It's just terrible, and especially the turning is terrible, especially when you're in the middle of a jump. But I also hate how the rings feel so useless in this game. Aside from just being health, I miss how in previous games you could be rewarded for getting through a stage with so many rings left over. You gotta use them to spend on items in the Chow Garden, or get some upgrades or special features for the game, and it's like those were great, but you don't get anything like that in this. So it's like the closest thing we get to a system like that are the fishing tokens, but again, I wouldn't really call them personal rewards. It's just stuff that you need to progress through the game, and like I said, this stuff is way too easy to find. If not, there's so many ways to get these items in the game that makes it feel like that fishing mode is kind of useless in the end. Like, I do think it's one of the fastest and possibly less annoying ways to get through the game, but still, it does feel broken. I'm not going to deny that. While there are at least 24 or more of these cyberspace levels throughout, they are some of the laziest moments in the game. They mostly recycle assets from Sonic Unleashed and Generations, and all the levels are recyclings of levels we've seen done to death this past decade, including Green Hill Zone, Chemical Plant Zone, and Sky Sanctuary. And the only other assets they seem to have recycled is Empire City from Sonic Unleashed, and I gotta admit, that's a level we haven't really seen a return of, but either way, I don't think a lot of fans were begging for that stage to return, and most of these acts are just painfully dull or horrible to control, and some of them are kind of neat though, but I liked how some of them are basically reskinned and repurposed stages. So despite how they use like a skin from something like Chemical Plant Zone or Green Hill Zone, you notice how the stage layout is from a different level from a different game. So I noticed like one level was basically a recreation of Metal Harbor and Skyrail from Sonic Adventure 2, and there might have been one that was a reference to Tropical Jungle from Sonic 06. But there's even one from the last world where Sonic rides on a skateboard, and that one was actually kind of fun. But despite that, I still think the cyberspace levels, they should have been a great idea, but they were one of the worst, most painful parts to get through. So after getting six Chaos Emeralds in the world, and after completing the following puzzle, Sonic confronts the world's Titan, and we get a segment where we have Sonic climb on top of the Titan to grab the 7th Chaos Emerald, which allows him to turn to Super Sonic and get into a super-powered boss fight. And at first I hated the Titan boss fights, but it probably would have been more enjoyable if I leveled up, because once you're like at max level, the boss fights are much easier. It's like otherwise it takes way too many hits to even do a little bit of damage on these things, so I could have leveled up a little more when I took on the first boss, for instance. But so overall, the boss fights weren't too bad, but like I said, it's too bad this doesn't have a proper replay mode. It would have been nice to be able to re-challenge these bosses after leveling up, and or for challenge seekers, have even harder versions of them, maybe, I don't know. But I thought the music during these were very unexpected and pretty good too. I especially love the music from the first Titan. That song was really good, but although that was my favorite song out of the boss fights, I'd say the third Titan was actually my favorite. The way it rollerbladed around like a canyon, and how at the end Sonic takes like its oversized sword and slashes it in half. That was really cool. I know people are already making fan art of that, but so while the gameplay is very flawed, it's still a good step in the right direction, and is the first time a Sonic game genuinely made me smile since Generations, and it's just nice to finally see a Sonic game make me, give me a little bit of hope again. I like been losing hope in the series ever since Sonic Lost World, and I'm not gonna lie, I almost gave up on the series after Sonic Forces, and so I saw Frontiers and I actually thought it looked a little more promising, and luckily it was. It is definitely a flawed game, though, but what's good works. It's like, it's a mixed bag, but I still like the game and I'd still recommend it. I just wish Sonic's friends were playable upon saving, and Now onto the graphics, animations, and performance. Despite having the Xbox Series S version, I hear the game practically looks and plays the same on every console, with the Switch having the lowest visuals and frame rate though, but despite being the first Sonic game on the current gen hardware like PS5 and Xbox Series consoles, its graphics and performance are very underwhelming, even compared to the past games before the HD era. It looks and performs as underwhelming as Sonic Forces, and the environments look decent, but if they feel nothing special, they just feel like stuff you've seen in every other open world game that we get way too much of nowadays. So just more of the same muddy, realistic looking grassy fields with ancient ruins, etc. Now I have no problem with detailed environments, but I do like a mixture of fantasy with it, and I wish we just saw more creative landmarks and colors, similar to like what we saw in games like Sonic Adventure. That had us exploring so many different varied locations, like a beach, a jungle, a snowy mountain, a theme park, a big city, a mother ship, etc. And in Frontiers, instead, all we get are just every other natural environment of like ruins with ancient tech you see in almost every other open world game. It's nothing special to help it stand out. I was never the biggest fan of open world games. Not only do I think they're overwhelming and easy to get lost in, but they just mostly feel lazy. Instead of developers and artists working hard to make memorable levels that are fun and help capture the imagination, they'd rather have a 3D modeling software just randomly generate a big landmass and copy and paste trees and rocks throughout, and it gets tiring seeing the same old stuff scattered throughout the same old levels throughout the same old game. And if they put more effort into smaller levels with more variety, we could have gotten more interesting levels, like a snow level, a beach water level, a haunted level, etc. But instead we just get one grassy field, one boring desert, and a horrible volcano level with too many pesky side-scrolling sections. The field of depth in this game is really bad as well, somehow even worse than nearly every previous Sonic game, probably the worst in the series, and it's like distant objects just pop out of thin air, instead of letting us properly see them from distances away. It's a peskier problem considering how so many items are high in the sky, and the field of depth makes it harder to pinpoint how exactly you can get up there. Then, of course, there's the character animations. It's sad how even the adventure games had better effort into their animation, despite their primitive 3D models and sometimes even odd-looking animations, but it somehow had more effort put into them. It feels like ever since Sonic Heroes, the cutscenes have just been getting lazier. It's like the characters don't have facial expressions anymore. It's like the only way Sega tries giving these characters emotions is just like having their eyelids either heighten or lower, you know. But it's like they don't have like eyebrow flexing anymore, so they just look so emotionless and blank stared and very robotic is what I've heard some people call it. And I will say the cutscenes though are still a slight improvement over cutscenes we've been getting in Sonic Colors and since Sonic Colors, but I think that mostly has to do with both the voice acting and writing and music. But the movements are still very stiff and the facial expressions still feel very soulless, and you think they would have improved by now, but there are many times where Sonic is supposed to look weakened or struggling or in pain, yet Sonic just ends up looking either annoyed or pissed off for no reason, despite how his voice conveys the opposite emotions. So, the 3D models need better face posing, more muscles in their eyebrows to help express themselves, and it doesn't help that the lip sync and motion is really bad, and sometimes all the characters aren't even moving their lips at all while talking. And I will say the textures look like a slight improvement. They did try making the characters have a slight velvety fur-looking texture. I mean, you could say they kind of had that ever since the Unleashed era, but it feels mostly like they've just been recycling the same models over and over. So at least it does feel like they touched up the textures a little bit this time. So I'd say the enemies and Titans are one of the few things that visually stand out in this game. Most of the enemies are larger than anything we've seen in a Sonic game, in gameplay at least, and it feels so satisfying to dodge their attacks and see them like just get destroyed, just break into massive pieces with big explosions. And that stuff is satisfying. So onto the music. No matter how bad some Sonic games might turn out, there's one thing that most fans can agree on, and that is that the music usually is really good, unless you're Sonic Chronicles. So, the music in this game is fantastic, a huge improvement over the heavily industrial and dubstep-styled music in games like Sonic Dash or Sonic Forces. Frontiers has a variety of music, from calm and melancholy to action-packed. So the overworld has like beautiful orchestric music, mostly consisting of piano and strings, which helps make Sonic's lone journey to save his friends feel more impactful, emotional, and mysterious. I especially love the music from the first main island, Starfall Island. And now, considering how this game has been compared a lot to Breath of the Wild, I can at least say this is one thing that this game has over Breath of the Wild. Most Zelda games have very iconic, memorable music, and I thought Breath of the Wild, it was relying too much on trying to sound ambient, that it just didn't have any recognizable tunes, really. It's like the only tune I can kind of remember is just the simple tune of when you get spotted by a guardian or something, but otherwise it mostly just had a few twinkles of piano notes scattered here and there, but it was so forgettable. And so I love how the music here feels more atmospheric. It adds to these levels. That's something that Breath of the Wild needed to keep my attention. And yeah, it's like I've heard some people compare like some of the music in this to like a Studio Ghibli film, and I kind of agree. Starfall Isles theme really does feel like something from a Studio Ghibli film almost. It's not something you would expect to hear in a Sonic game, but something you're glad to hear in a Sonic game. The cyberspace levels, on the other hand, really do have music that sounds like the generic technical stuff you would hear in Sonic Forces, so slightly less painful to listen to, but I'd say like the cyberspace levels are the weakest tracks in the game. The Titan boss fight themes, on the other hand, holy cow, those were unexpected. They have a bit of some metal rock and roll songs with vocals to them, and most of them are really good. I especially love the first one, but so, strangely enough, this game has 3 end credit songs. There's one that you'll hear regardless of difficulty, but then there's one of 2 you can get depending on the difficulty you played. So, yeah, so remember the song that Sega heavily promoted, Vandalize? Oh, that song freaking rocks. But anyways, during my hard mode playthrough, I was wondering why Vandalize did it play at all. Sega flat out said it would be the game's ending theme. So instead, another song played called One Way Dream, which, I'm not going to lie, it's a great song. I loved it. I can't even stop listening to it on replay, but while the song is great, I was still wondering, where's Vandalize? I thought that was a song from this game. Did Sega find out about the uncensored version and chicken out, pull the plug? But so it turns out, though, I was informed by a comment on YouTube that Vandalize only plays when you complete the game on easy or normal mode. How strange is that? But so, and yeah, I did test that out, and it is true. I did go back and replay the final boss on easy mode, and yeah, that Vandalize all of a sudden played during the credits instead of One Way Dream. So, there is another thing you get from beating hard mode, but I'll get to that later. I wouldn't even say for beating hard mode, more like just playing on hard mode, but otherwise, the music was an emotional roller coaster and complemented the gameplay and cutscenes very well. Honestly, this is the best music I've heard in a Sonic game in a long time, since Sonic Unleashed. And so, on to the story and the writing. While the cutscenes were more entertaining than anything we've gotten during the Colors era, especially for the character interactions and boss encounters, the story was very forgettable and hard to follow. A lot isn't explained. I can't even remember what kicked off the plot of the game, really. Something about Eggman messing with some ruins, it somehow sucks him into a cyberspace, and it somehow leads to Sonic, Tails, and Amy getting trapped as well. Like, what the heck is going on? Knuckles is also trapped, but you wouldn't know that ahead of time unless you watch the anime prologue for Sonic Frontiers, which was surprisingly really good. You can find it on the official Sonic the Hedgehog YouTube page. So Sonic runs through the first cyberspace level before escaping, landing in the main overworld, Starfall Island. He finds Amy trapped in a digital cage, and upon freeing her, she looks corrupted and transparent, partially being trapped in the cyberspace still. Now, Sonic freed Amy, some corrupted digital data sinks into Sonic, and it's something that happens every time Sonic saves his friends in each world. So, Sonic tries helping Amy become whole again, despite not knowing how. Meanwhile, we are shown these creatures called the Coco, who are poorly introduced. We know nothing of these creatures yet. The game expects us to act like we've heard of them, or that the characters have heard of them, and they want to learn more about them, despite not giving players any context or reason to want to follow. Most of the worlds have a friend of Sonic's trying to help the Cocos with their problems and needs Sonic's help, which leads to some pesky side missions. Amy wants to reunite a Coco with its lost love for some reason. Sonic is more interested in finding Tails, but Amy shames Sonic for ignoring a creature in need and helps remind Sonic of what being a real hero is all about. Throughout the game, Sonic keeps confronting a mysterious girl named Sage, who keeps warning Sonic to get lost, basically, and warns him that if he goes any further, he will be destroyed by the Titans. So, the plot is very confusing. One minute, Sage seems to be working with the Titans, only to be trying to act like she was trying to stop them the whole time. In the end, I don't know. But there will be some spoilers with this game down the line. I should have mentioned that ahead of time. But either way, Sage starts off as a conflicted villain character who softens up over witnessing Sonic's heroics and friendship. In each chapter, we get a strange flashback cutting to a group of aliens called the Ancients. One look at them and I said, these things look a lot like Chaos Zero, and according to one of Eggman's memos, it is confirmed that yes, they are related to Chaos. It's also implied that the Coco are the lingering spirits of the Ancients who've passed away, and they aren't allowed to rest in peace until a purpose has been fulfilled. So the first world has us trying to reunite two Coco lovers, and once we finally get them to reunite, they die, and Sonic and Amy learn through a flashback that the ruins they're in was the home of the Ancients before they were wiped out by the Titans and their guardians. We get a very touching and emotional cutscene where Amy is sitting in a field of flowers trying to hold on to one, only for her fingers to keep phasing through them each time, and Sonic comforts her by sitting with her. So each chapter gets an emotional scene like this with each of Sonic's friends. These are honestly some of the best scenes in the game. They give us such humanity and maturity to the characters we've known and loved for like over decades now, and it's very refreshing to see this take on these characters instead of seeing these cringy, childish versions of them that we've been getting this past decade. While the story is overall a confusing mess, the portrayals of Sonic and Pals are genuinely good and give the characters good development and even callbacks to previous games. So I kind of wish Amy was handled as well as Tails and Knuckles. I don't know, I felt hers was kind of out of place compared to them. So like Tails and Knuckles seem to have some kind of doubts or insecurities which Sonic is able to comfort and empower them for. So Sonic encourages Knuckles that he's not alone anymore, and he encourages Tails that he's not a nuisance, and that Tails can accomplish so much and be his own hero. So it was strange to see Tails mention how Sonic is always saving him. It honestly felt more like a line that was meant for Amy, since she used to be the damsel in distress, but it would have been nice for Sonic to encourage Amy by reminding her of how far she's come since those days. And Knuckles' problem seems to be accepting that he doesn't need to be alone anymore, and Tails is he has his own greatness and can do stuff on his own. But so meanwhile, Amy doesn't get any form of insecurity that Sonic can help her overcome, and she's just saddened over the death of these two loved aliens or so. I don't know, it's weird. But so Amy's theme in this game could be considered something about love. It's like, Tails is independence, Knuckles is needing like others, and so for Amy, hers could be considered love. And so it almost feels like the game was originally meant to like Ian Flynn, the writer for this, it makes it seem like maybe he wanted there to be some romance between Sonic and Amy, but Sega strictly has a rule against Sonic having girlfriends anymore, so they were forced to drop their original plans and forced in a conflict of loved Cocos instead. That's just the way I picked up from it, because it's weird how the scenes between Sonic and Amy feel very different compared to the ones with Tails and Knuckles, which seem to have more of a connected pattern. It's still a cute scene, though, but it feels less impactful and emotional compared to the Knuckles and Tails scenes. At least Sonic and Amy were still handled like great friends in this, a huge improvement over their dysfunctional earlier years. The game's writing may be confusing at times, but it's more respectful this time around, much less cringy jokes and lines, and more heartfelt drama. It really reminds me of the better writing from Sonic Unleashed and Sonic and the Black Knight. It's nice to see them ditch the silly and sarcastic meta tones of the Colors era, Sometimes it even bashes on the bad takes from previous games without getting too meta or breaking the fourth wall. There was at least one funny meta joke in this game, and it felt well earned since the whole game went so long without using any of these. So there's a point where Sage asks Sonic what his goal is, and Sonic starts describing the level end goals from previous games, like describing the spinning signs and the giant rings. That was kind of funny. It felt earned. The voice actors also stepped up their game, sounding more serious, deeper, and more concerned, less wacky and childish like in the previous decade, and I honestly really like this portrayal of the characters and wish to see more of it in the future. In the second chapter, Sonic is in a big desert level where he tries saving Knuckles. Knuckles tries forming a Coco army for some reason. Sonic and Knuckles learn that the ancients were what inspired the Echidna tribe's lifestyle and architecture. We learn that Sage is working with Eggman and trying to free him from cyberspace, but later on in the game it's revealed that she is actually trying to keep him in there to keep him safe, so I don't really know. It's like, does the writing remember what it said earlier and forget about it? I don't know, but in a bigger twist, it's revealed that Sage is an artificial intelligence created by Eggman. Why he built her, I have no idea, but I really wish they explored more of these two, because it feels like they're supposed to have a big important role and connection, but the game fails to really delve into it. This game seems to want to portray Sage as a lost soul who sees Eggman as her father figure, desperately trying to get his attention. Meanwhile, we see Eggman realizes that she's more than just another robot or creation he made. She's special. He finally invented someone who's he's proud of and someone who needs him. This game just doesn't have enough scenes between them to make it feel special, though, and they're just there. It would have been more emotional to see Sage struggling for Eggman's affection and see Eggman slowly warming up to her, but we don't really get much of that. There's like a few scenes where Sage refers to Eggman as father or something. We see Eggman refusing to return the favor, but still, it would have been nice to actually see more development of that, and it was a neat idea, but not well executed or established. Not well explained either. So Chapter 3 was the worst chapter, in my opinion, despite having the best Titan boss fight. This level is just a pain to navigate through, and has way too many one-way side-scrolling segments necessary to progress. It's a giant volcano island, and Tails wants Sonic to help the Coco find parts to repair contraptions, and it leads to some really bad mini-games. Upon Sage's observation of Sonic, she considers Sonic isn't really much of a threat, and considers Eggman forming a truce with Sonic to help get him out, but Eggman refuses. So as Sonic's body gets worse with the data corruption, Sonic is tasked to go back to the first island and shut down 6 giant towers. Meanwhile, we learn that the Ancients came from space and they were responsible for bringing the Chaos Emeralds and the Master Emerald to Earth. Their home was destroyed from a destructive living planet called The End. As others evacuated with UFOs to Earth, they formed the Titans to destroy The End, but The End corrupted the Titans to destroy their creators in New Home on Earth instead. The corruption finally takes over Sonic and traps him in cyberspace with his friends and Eggman. Sonic is now like a lifeless husk. Amy, Tails, and Knuckles huddle together and sacrifice their digital spirits. They somehow restore Sonic and somehow free Sonic, Eggman, and Sage back into the real world, and this should have been an emotional scene, but I felt nothing by it. I'll even dare say the scene in Sonic 06 where Sonic's friends find Sonic dead was more heartbreaking, and the scene felt incredibly rushed. It feels like it was meant to give Tails, Knuckles, and Amy a playable role at one point, where they had to go through some stuff to try to restore Sonic, only for Sega to interfere and try to get it over with much quicker to meet a deadline or something. I don't know, but Sonic, Eggman, and Sage end up on an expanded part of the first island where a 4th and final Titan is on the loose. Eggman gives in to Sage and decides to help Sonic after all. So, despite being a bigger expansion on the first island, the final chapter is the longest in the game and arguably the best level in my opinion at least. But however, this level requires much more items needed to progress than ever before, and So otherwise, the fishing mode on this, while it does cost more coins to go through the fishing minigames, the rewards are much more rewarding this time, making it very easy and possible to max out all your stats. But too bad it's still a very time-consuming process, because while maxing out your attack and defense stats are very easy, updating your ring and speed stats, on the other hand, will take way too long. You upgrade them by finding an Elder Coco and talking to him. And so every time you talk to him, you can activate a few little things that will allow him to level up each stat one at a time. So considering how each of these two stats has 99 out of a max level, that means you'll have to talk to him like 198 times to max out those stats, which is very time consuming and very boring. Otherwise, like, once you finally get maxed out, the final boss should be a very easy cinch, unless you're playing on hard mode. But so once you finally got enough items to talk with Sage and get the final emeralds and all that, you're finally ready for the final battle. So I heard the final battle can only be triggered when playing in hard mode. Luckily, you can go to the pause options and activate hard mode right before going to the final boss. So after a very underwhelming final Titan boss fight, the literal end boss shows up in space, and Sage warns Sonic that his super form won't be enough. She manages to say goodbye to Eggman and takes possession of the final Titan's body, and she flies up with Sonic to finish the end. Eggman refers to Sage as his daughter, finally. Now, depending on which difficulty you chose, the final phase will be altered. Playing on hard mode gives you an extra boss phase where Sonic and Sage fight the end in a bullet hell shooter arcade style setting, and it shares the same gameplay as some of the shooting minigames you had to play earlier in the game. And honestly, this real final battle sucked. It is way too jarring and out of place to be a final battle in a Sonic game, and it doesn't really feel like you're controlling Super Sonic. It feels more like you're controlling Sage and the Titan, but it only gives you 3 lives, and one hit kills you. So it just feels very out of place. Too arcade-ish for what's supposed to be a Sonic final battle. It was not fun. Honestly, you're better off just skipping it. Just beat the game on easy or normal. You're really not missing out on much. Aside from getting an alternate credit song, you get nothing extra for beating it on hard mode. So after beating the boss on hard mode, it's still not over. There's a quick time event, and where Sage hurls Supersonic at the end, and you have to time the X button on a sliding gauge 3 times to trigger the finishing blow. I accidentally messed up on it somehow, and so I was hoping, okay, maybe I'll just have to start the whole quick time event over. No, I had to do the whole shooting segment all over, and that is a lengthy. Oh my god, it takes forever. The enemy just like absorbs all your blows, and it's especially frustrating because you spent all that time, you know, max leveling Sonic, only to find out it doesn't affect the final phase. So yeah, that really sucked. So after beating the game on hard mode, I did wonder what would be so different if you played it on easy or normal mode, and it's like you still get the exact same cutscenes, the exact same ending. The only difference is that it does cut out the shootout mode. You still get the cutscenes in the QuickTime event, but you no longer have to play that bullet hell shooter. So honestly, you're better off just playing the game on easy or normal mode. Forget playing it on hard mode. It's not worth it. So yeah, the final battle was just not fun at all. It took me about 6 tries, and so after Sonic finally rams through the end starts self-destructing in front of Sonic, and Sage ends up sacrificing herself to save Sonic in the process. So with the end gone, Sonic and pals finally return from cyberspace as they get a wholesome reunion with Sonic. We get a sad shot of Eggman reaching out in the distance as an explosion of stars fall from the sky. During the credits, we get 2 epilogues, one of Sonic and pals saying what they'll do next as they return home on the tornado, and a cliffhanger ending where Eggman is using the Ancient's tech to rebuild Sage. So yeah, it does leave a lot of questions. Is Sage going to be a reoccurring character in the future? Is she going to now, is Eggman going to reprogram her to forget all about Sonic and be more evil or something? I don't know, but hard to say, but it's like, I wish I could say Sage was an interesting character. She could have been an interesting character, but the game just didn't use her enough or develop her enough to be interesting enough. Like, I honestly had a feeling that was what her role was going to be. She's going to start off as a villain, warm up to Sonic, and I will admit I did not see the predictable or the overused cliche of the new character sacrificing himself, though, but either way. So, overall, Sonic Frontiers might be a divisive entry in the franchise. It will most likely upset the classic Genesis fans. It might possibly please the adventure fans and the modern boost formula fans, but overall, I did enjoy the game, but I just wish the controls were better. I wish there were more playable characters. I wish there was no forced upon side-scrolling. And I wish there were better unlockables. Despite the flaws, it was just too much fun and enjoyable to hate on. And it was a huge improvement over every Sonic game since Sonic Colors. But hopefully this game will receive free DLC updates and maybe some expansion down the line. But otherwise, as of recording of this video, a new DLC did come out today, and it was for free. It added basically some cosmetics themed after Monster Hunter, so a crossover event, and it also adds a new feature to Big's fishing mode, where Sonic can cook up meat similarly to the cooking feature in Monster Hunter. So cooking meat correctly rewards Sonic with fishing tokens, so basically a way to earn fishing tokens without having to pay the purple coins to fish for them. You're probably better off just waiting until you get to the final fishing level and you're able to rank up more coins much faster in that. But so either way, this just makes the broken fishing mode even more broken. Now you can get free tokens without having to pay for any of it. Just keep spamming this event over and over to farm up on fishing tokens. But yeah, overall Sonic Frontiers, I do recommend it. It is a flawed game, but I still enjoyed it overall. I don't know, either a 7.5 or 8 out of 10 maybe. Not the perfect game, but it is a huge improvement over some of the previous entries we've been getting this past few decades, and I hope to see them improve upon this and bring back a little bit more of what worked in the adventure games. But that's all I have to show for now. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Have a great day.